I'd like to echo the sentiments of the speakers before me in thanking CDCP for this opportunity and WestEd as well. In 2014, at least 939 women and 301 men were killed by their intimate partners. Now, this does represent a continued downward trend in intimate partner homicide that's been going on for a couple of decades now. 54% of intimate partner homicides were committed with firearms in 2014. And if we were to break this pie chart, up into male victimizations and female victimizations, we would see that more women were killed with firearms than were men. Domestic violence that involves firearms is more deadly than domestic violence that involves knives, bodily force, and other weapons. And intimate partner violence perpetrators who have firearms are at a higher risk of committing homicide than those who do not, with one study suggesting there's a 5-fold increased risk in intimate partner homicide when a violent partner has a firearm. So the evidence is fairly clear that in the hands of a violent intimate partner, a firearm represents a clear and fatal threat to victims. So this is something that we would want to intervene on to reduce intimate partner homicide. And there are opportunities for intervention. Intimate partner violence victims go to the criminal justice system for intervention quite often. And a few studies have looked at intimate partner homicide victims and saw that about 50% of them in the year before their homicides went to the criminal justice system, and they went to complain about domestic violence and stalking, they went to petition for restraining orders, and they went to try to get charges against their batterers. And often when these women go to the criminal justice system, it is within the context of separating from or just having separated from their intimate partners. And research suggests that this is a particularly dangerous and lethal time for women. This is when they are at the highest risk of being killed. But they're there at the criminal justice system, so we can intervene with them through policy. One of the policies that has been studied the most is a policy that says that if you are under a certain type of domestic violence restraining order, you are not allowed to have a firearm. You're not allowed to purchase or possess a firearm. And that is federal law, and the majority of states have this law as well, but in states they tend to be broader than the federal law. Many states cover dating partners, which are not covered by the federal law, and many states cover ex parte restraining orders, which are not covered by the federal law. 3 longitudinal studies have looked at the impact of these laws on intimate partner homicide, and they use the time period from 1980 through early 2000s to mid-2000s. And each of these studies was consistent in finding that in the states where these laws were in place, there was about a 7 to 19% reduction in intimate partner homicide. And both intimate partner homicide committed with firearms and total intimate partner homicide were reduced. And this is important because there is a hypothesis that if someone doesn't have a gun and they want to kill their intimate partner, they will kill their intimate partner through other means, a knife, bodily force, but they'll do it. If that were the case, we would expect total intimate partner homicides to not change, to stay roughly the same, and firearm intimate partner homicide to go down. But that's not what any of these 3 studies saw. Total intimate partner homicide was reduced as well, suggesting that there was no substitution effect. But these laws are difficult to implement. The purchase prohibition is fairly straightforward. If you want to buy a gun, you go to a federally licensed dealer and they get a background check. They find the restraining order that prohibits you from purchase, and you're not allowed to buy. But if you already possess a firearm when this prohibition is put upon you, it's more complicated. Law enforcement has to discover you have a firearm, they have to get the firearm from you, and we know that that often doesn't happen. But many jurisdictions in some states are working on better implementation of this possession prohibition. And as you can see on this map, the states in, it should be green, but light green and dark green have provisions that say that if you are prohibited from firearm possession by a domestic violence restraining order, you have to disarm yourself. And the form that these laws generally take is that you have to turn the firearm into law enforcement within a certain amount of time, 24 to 72 hours, it depends on the state, or you can transfer the firearm to a federally licensed firearm dealer and take your receipt or affidavit to law enforcement to prove that you did this. In some states, if you don't relinquish your firearm, a court can order a search and seizure of the weapon. A demonstration project in California looked at the implementation of California's law in 2 counties. And what they did was, when law enforcement knew that someone had a firearm, when they went to serve the restraining order, they explained the prohibition and asked for the firearm, or told the person to sell it, to transfer it to a federally licensed firearm dealer. And they actually had quite a bit of success in getting firearms from those people who were newly prohibited. And importantly, it did not increase danger to the law enforcement officers when serving these restraining orders. The last policy I want to talk to you about is a policy that says that if you're convicted of misdemeanor violence, domestic violence, you are not allowed to have a firearm. This is at the federal level, and many states have this policy as well. But some states have gone further and applied this prohibition to all violent misdemeanors. It doesn't matter what the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim is. And those 3 studies I mentioned earlier looked at the impact of the domestic violence specific firearm prohibition, and none of the 3 studies found an impact on intimate partner homicide. Research that I have completed and am submitting for peer review very soon, hopefully next week, we looked at the broader violent misdemeanor law. And we found that when a state prohibited all those who committed violent misdemeanors from purchase and possession of a weapon, there was about an 18% associated reduction in intimate partner homicide. And we think that this law may have more of an impact than the domestic violence specific law because it doesn't require a specific relationship. When you go to purchase a firearm and a violent misdemeanor comes up during the background check, whoever's doing the background check, whoever's on the back end of that, has to then investigate what the relationship between the victim and the suspect is. And there's a big chance for error in that. But if it's just a violent misdemeanor prohibition, then no. Right away you know that they cannot have a firearm. So this law may simply catch more people, and it also may catch those people who have committed violent misdemeanors, not against their intimate partners, but may then go on to be violent against their intimate partners. So we have a lot of information, but there are many gaps in the literature. How does this work? How are these laws being implemented? So we need a lot more research to be done, but there is hope. We have some directions. And if you have any questions, please email me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.